Welcome to another edition of That's a Good Cup of Joe, Constitutional Edition. So we're going to continue with Federalist paper number 10, which happens to be the same subject that we were doing on section 9, on number 9. So it is the Union as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. And this is from the New York Packet, February 23rd, 1787. And this one is from James Madison. So, to the people of the state of New York. Among the numerous advantages promised by a well-constructed union, none deserves to be more actually developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. The friend of popular governments never finds himself so much alarmed of their character and fate as when he contemplates their propensity to this dangerous vice. He will not fail, therefore, to set a due value on any plan which, without violating the principles to which he is attached, provides a proper cure for it. The instability, injustice, and confusion introduced into the public councils have, in truth, been the mortal disease under which popular governments have everywhere perished, as they continue to be the favorite and fruitful topics from which the adversities to liberty deserve their most spacious declamations. The valuable improvements made by the American constitutions on the popular models, both ancient and modern, cannot certainly be too much admired, but it would be an unwarrantable partiality to contend that they have as effectually obviated the danger on this side, as was wished and expected. Complaints are everywhere heard from our most considerate and virtuous citizens, equally the friends of public and private faith, and of public and personal liberty, that our governments are too unstable, that the public good is disregarded in the conflicts of rival parties, and the measures are too often decided, not according to the rules of justice and the rights of the minor party, but by the superior force of an interested and overbearing majority. However, anxiously we may wish that these complaints had no foundation. The evidence of known facts will not permit us to deny that they are in some degree true. It will be founded, indeed, on a candid review of our situation, that some of the distresses under which we labor have been erroneously charged on the operation of our governments. But it will be founded at the same time that other causes will not alone account for the many of our heaviest misfortunes, and particularly for that prevailing and increasing distrust of public engagements, and alarm for private rights which are echoed from one end of the continent to the other. These must be chiefly, if not wholly, effects of this unsteadiness and injustice with which the faction spirit hath tainted our public administrations. By a faction, I understand that a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or minority of the whole, who are united and are actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interests adverse to the rights of other citizens, or the permanent and aggregated interests of the community. There are two methods of curing the mischiefs of faction, the one by removing its causes, the other by controlling its effects. There are again two methods of removing the causes of factions, the one by destroying the liberty which is essential to existence, the other by giving to every citizen the same opinions, the same passions, and the same interests. It could never be more truly said than of the first remedy that it was worse than the disease. Liberty is the faction what air is the fire, the ailment without which is instantly expires. But it could not be less folly to abolish liberty, which is essential to political life, because if nourishes factions, then it would be to wish for the annihilation of air, which is essential to animal life, because it imparts to fire its destructive agency. The second expedient is as practical as the first would be unwise. As long as the reason of man continues fallible, and he is at liberty to exercise it, different opinions will be formed, as long as a connection subsists between his reason and his self-love. His opinions and his passions will be reciprocal influence to each other, and the former will be objects to which the latter will attach themselves. The diversity of the faculties of men, from which the rights of property originate, is not less an insuperable obstacle to the uniformity of interests. The protection of these faculties is the first object of government. From the protection of different and unequal facilities of the acquiring property, the possession of different degrees and kinds of property immediately results, and from the influence of these on the sentiments and views of the respective proprietors, ensues a division of the society into different interests and parties. The latent causes of factions are thus shown in the nature of man, and we see them everywhere throughout the different degrees of activity. According to the different circumstances of civil society, a zeal for different opinions concerning religion, concerning government, and many other points, as well as speculation as a practice, an attachment to different leaders ambitiously contending for preeminence and power, or to persons of other descriptions whose fortune have been interesting to the human passions, have in turn divided mankind into parties, inflamed them with mutual animosity, and rendered them much more disposed to vex and oppress each other than to cooperate for their common good. So strong is this propensity of mankind to fall into mutual animosities that where no substantial occasion present itself, the most frivolous and fanatical distinctions have been sufficient to kindle their unfriendly passions and excite their most violent conflicts. But the most common and durable source of faction has been the various and unequal distribution of property. Those who hold and those who are without property have ever formed distinct interests in society. Those who are creditors and those who are debtors fall under like discrimination. A landed interest, a manufacturing interest, a mercantile interest, a moneyed interest, with many lesser interests, grow up of necessity in civilized nation and divide them into different classes. Actuated by different sentiments and views, the regulation of these various and interfering interests form a principal task of modern legislation and involves the spirit of party and faction in the necessary and ordinary operations of the government. No man is allowed to be a judge of his own cause, because his interest would certainly bias his judgment and not improbably corrupt his integrity. With equal, nay, with greater reason, a body of men are unfit to be both judges and parties at the same time. Yet, what are many of the most important acts of legislation, but so many judicial determinations, not indeed concerning the rights of a single person, but concerning the rights of larger bodies of citizens? And what are the different classes of legislators but advocates and parties to the causes which they determine? Is a law proposed concerning private debt? It is a question to which the creditors are parties on one side and debtors are on the other. Justice ought to hold the balance between them, yet the parties are and must be themselves the judges, and the most numerous party, or, in other words, the most powerful faction, must be expected to prevail. Shall domestic manufacturers be encouraged, and in what degree, by restrictions on foreign manufacturers? Are questions which would be differently decided by the land and the manufacturing classes, and probably by neither with a sole regard to justice and the public good. The apportionment of taxes on the various descriptions of property is an act which seems to require the most exact impartiality, yet there is perhaps no legislative act in which greater opportunity and temptations are given to a predominant party to trample the rules of justice. Every shilling with which they overburden the inferior number is a shilling saved in their own pockets. That's very interesting. It is the vain to say that enlightened statesmen will be able to adjust these clashing interests and render them all subsequent to the public good. Enlightened statesmen will not always be at the helm, nor, in many cases, can such an adjustment be made to all without taking into view indirect and remote considerations, which will rarely prevail over the immediate interests which one party may find in disregarding the rights of another or the good of the whole. The inference to which we are brought is that the causes of faction cannot be removed, and that relief is only to be brought in the means of controlling its effect. If a faction consists of less than the minority, relief is supplied by the Republican principle, which enables the majority to defeat its sinister views by a regular vote. It may clog the administration, it may convulse the society, but it will be unable to execute the mask its violence under the forms of the Constitution. When a majority is included in a faction, the form of a popular government, on the other hand, enables it to sacrifice to its ruling passions or interests both the public good and the rights of other citizens. To secure the public good and private rights against the danger of such a faction, and at the same time to preserve the spirit and the form of popular government, is then the great object to which our inquiries are directed. Let me add that it is with great disincrum by which this form of government can be rescued from the absurdum under which it has so long labored, and be recommended to the esteem and adoption of mankind. By what means is this object attainable? Evidently by one of two only. Either the existence of the same passion or interest in the majority at the same time must be prevented, or the majority having such coexistent passion or interest must be rendered by their number and local situation, unable to concert and carry into effect schemes of oppression. If the impulse and the opportunity be suffered to coincide, we will know that neither moral nor religious motives can be relied on as an adequate control. They are not founded to be such an injustice and violence of individuals, and lose their efficacy in proportion to the number combined together. That is, in proportion to the efficacy becomes needful. From this view of the subject, it may be concluded that the pure democracy, by which I mean a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assembled and administered the government in person, can admit no cure for the mischiefs of factions. A common passion or interest will, in almost every case, be felt by the majority of the whole. A communication and concert result from the form of government itself, and there is nothing to check the inducements to sacrifice the weaker party or an obnoxious individual. Hence, it is that such democracy have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incapable with the personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. Theoretic politicians who have patronized this species of government have erroneously supposed that by rendering mankind as a perfect equality in their political rights, they would at the same time be perfectly equalized and assimilated in their possessions, their opinions, and their passions. A republic, by which I mean a government in which the scheme of representation takes place, opens a different prospect. The promises the cure for which we are seeking. Let us examine the point in which it varies from pure democracy, and we shall comprehend both the nature of the cure and the efficacy which it must derive from the union. The two great points of difference between a democracy and a republic are, first, the delegation of the government. In the latter, a small number of citizens elected by the rest. Secondly, the greater number of citizens and greater sphere of country, over which the latter may be extended. The effects of the first difference is, on one hand, to refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through a medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interests of their country, and those patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary or partial considerations. Under such regulation, it may well happen that the public voice, pronounced by the representatives of the people, will be more consistent to the public good than if pronounced by the people themselves, conveyed for the purpose. On the other hand, the effect may be inverted. Men of factious tempers, of local prejudices, or of sinister design may by intrigue, by corruption, or by other means, first obtain the suffrages and then betray the interests of the people. The questions resulting is whether a small or extensive republics are more favorable to the election of the proper guardian of the public weal. It is clearly decided in favor of the latter of the two obvious considerations. In the first place, it is to be remarked that, however small the republic may be, the representatives must be raised to a certain number in order to guard against the cabals of a few, and that, however large it may be, they must be limited to the certain number in order to guard against the confusion of the multitude. Hence, the number of representatives in the two cases not being in proportion to that of the two constituents, and being proportionally greater in the small republic, it follows that, if the proportion to fit characters be not less than the large than in the small republic, the former will represent a greater option and consequently a greater probability of a fit choice. In the next place, as each representative will be chosen by the greater number of citizens in the large than in the small republic, it will be more difficult for unworthy candidates to practice with success and vicious arts by which elections are too often carried. And the suffrage of the people, being more free, will more likely to center in men who possess the most attractive merit and the most diffusive and established character. It must be confessed that in this, as in most other cases, there is a mean on both sides of the inconveniences will be found to lie. By enlarging too much the number of electors, you render the representatives too little acquainted with all local circumstances and lesser interests, as by reducing it too much, you render them unduly attached to these, and too little fit to comprehend and pursue great and national objects. The federal constitution forms a happy combination in this respect, the great and aggregated interests being referred to the national, the local, and in particular to the state legislators. Another point of difference is the greater number of citizens and extent of territory which may be brought within the compass of republican than of democratic government, and it is this circumstance principally which renders factions combinations less than be dreaded in the former than in the latter. The smaller the society, the fewer probability will be the distinct parties and interests composing it. The fewer the distinct parties and interests will more frequently be majority be founded of the same party. And the smaller the number of individuals composing a majority, and the smaller the compass within which they are placed, the more easily will they concert and execute their plans of oppression. Extend the spear, and you take in a greater variety of parties and interests. You make it less probable that the majority of the whole will have a common motivation to invade the rights of other citizens, or if such common motives exist, it will be more difficult for all who feel it to discover their own strength and to act in unison with each other. Besides other impediments, it may be remarked that where there is a conscientiousness of unjust or dishonorable purchases, communication is always checked by distrust in proportion to those numbers whose concurrence is necessary. Hence, it clearly appears that the same advantage which a republic has over a democracy, of controlling the effects of factions, is enjoyed by a large over a small republic, is enjoyed by the union over the states composing it. Does the advantage consist in the substitution of representatives whose enlightened views and virtuous sentiments render them superior to local prejudices and schemes of injustice? It will not be denied that the representation of the Union will be most likely to possess those requisite endowments. Does it consist in the greater security afforded by the greater variety of parties against the evidence of any one party being able to outnumber and oppress the rest? In an equal degree, does the increased variety of parties comprised within the Union increase the security? Does it, in fine, consistent to the greater obstacles imposed to the concert and accomplishment of the secret wishes of an unjust and interested majority? Here again, the extent of the Union gives it the most probable advantage. The influence of factious leaders may kindle a flame within their particular states, but will be unable to spread a general conflagration through the other states. A religious sect may degenerate into a political faction in a part of the Confederacy, but the variety of sects dispersed over the entire face of it must secure the national councils against any danger from that source. A rage of paper money for an abolition of debts, for the equal division of property, or for any other improper or wicked project will be less apt to preserve the whole body of the Union than a particular member of it. And the same proportion of such a malady are more likely to taint a particular country or district than the entire state. In the extent and proper structure of the Union, therefore, we behold a Republican remedy for the diseases most incident to Republican government, and according to the degree of pleasure and pride we feel in being Republicans, ought to be our zeal in cherishing the spirit and supporting the character of Federalists. Oh boy, that is a meaty steak, real meaty. I gotta tell you, the brain drain of the conversation in establishing this Constitution is weighty. The thought process for which went into trying to create a government that allows for different thought processes to be presented and to develop a means of understanding each other so as to put forth proper legislation. Because there are just so many different interests: money, land, mercantile and, all the different financial sects and even religion, right? Because religion, through history, has always been a factor in oppression. Because in my mind, I feel that religion relies on the fact of people being submissive into understanding the hierarchy of existence, that there is an almighty God. So if you do it under that umbrella and you make a list of things for which to follow, we have the periods in time where religion has committed the most atrocities over the years, over mankind's existence. Through the Dark Ages and, and all those, look at the movies in the Three Musketeers, the Cardinals, right? The Cardinals were the most vicious individuals out there, right? Leading armies and stuff, handing out decrees and so forth. That's a corny thing to bring up, though, but it's just an example of how different viewpoints, though they may disagree with other people, the persistent nature in seeing certain things through because you believe that you have the better means of controlling other people can cause you to develop a secret police, a masked group that will invade your home, pull you out into the street, and deport you. January 6th, to me, was the first salvo of the insurrection. And this year, I feel the insurrection has taken the stand. What's going on in our streets? It's unheard of. I've never experienced it in my life. I may have seen these things over in other countries, but I never thought it would be within us. I missed existing in a Jim Crow area. I don't know how I would respond living under that oppression. Being looked upon as a lesser individual. Having somebody think that my existence doesn't matter except to serve. That the idea of me drinking from the same water fountain means that I should be punished. That a certain sign will be placed over that I need to use this bathroom instead of that one. The Constitution starts with "we the people." Doesn't say "we the people, but not you." Doesn't say "we, my people, not you." Done with 10. We'll be back with number 11. That is today's Good Cup of Joe.